Moldova was part of the Soviet Union for many years, was the Soviet Republic, and when the Soviet Union collapsed in 91, Moldova, like other 15 Soviet republics, declared its independence. But after we declared our independence, we faced many, many challenges. Our economy, education, and healthcare was part of the same system, part of the same country. So overnight, when everything collapsed, this caused a lot of problems, a lot of challenges. Uh, the first years of our independence, uh, we were more, I would say, probably romantic, idealistic about our future. And at that time, if you remember, the president of Russia was Mr. Yeltsin, Boris Yeltsin. And for example, he signed an agreement with Mr. Clinton that by the year of 2000, Russian troops will be withdrawn from our territory. But soon after Mr. Putin became the prime minister and then the president of Russia, the situation drastically changed. Mr. Putin ignored completely that agreement that was signed by two presidents, and we still have Russian troops on our territory. One of the statements of Mr. Putin is, for example, that the biggest tragedy of the 20th century is the collapse of the Soviet Union. So he decided to rebuild the Soviet Union in one way or another. Because we felt this, and people in Moldova, let's say majority of people in Moldova, not all people in Moldova, they felt that we need to strengthen our independence. We need to be more, to be a free country, not to depend on Russia. We didn't want to go back into the Soviet Union. But this is not an easy process. Sometimes I use the term, probably heard, Egypt syndrome. Someone said that it took God one night to get Israel out of Egypt, but then it took God 40 years to get Egypt out of them. So we have been free for this year. We will celebrate 35 years of our independence. So we haven't reached yet 40 years. But even if we would, we are not led by people like Moses. So in a way, it's another challenge how to get out of that Egypt bondage. So it was a continuous struggle. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, we are still fighting, struggling. For example, in 2001, I was elected in 1998 for the first time and served 3 years in the parliament. In 2001, we had the crisis and we had yearly elections. The communists won the power. The communists, they represent basically that nostalgia for the past, for the Soviet Union. So for 8 years, they were in power. Then in 2009, and during all these 8 years, I was the president of the Baptist Union of Moldova. We use the term bishop. In 2009, there was so-called Twitter revolution, and we were able, the pro-European forces were able to get the power from the Communist Party, and we started our European integration. For us, we felt that the future of Moldova should be in the European Union, as part of the European Union. There are voices in Moldova that they see Moldova as part of NATO, but was another thing that happened when Moldova declared its independence. Because of the Russian influence, many analysts say, there was a clause introduced in our constitution, a clause that mentions that Moldova is a neutral country. We cannot be part of any military bloc. So that is still in our constitution. We cannot join any military bloc unless we change, the constitution. Well, from 2009 till, let's say, 2019, for next 10 years, I think Moldova made some progress on the European integration path. I was part of the government during all these 10 years. But unfortunately, we were affected by scandals of corruption. And the prime minister that I was part of the party was put in jail for corruption. And then the coalition basically, we lost the majority in the parliament. We went through another crisis, and we had elections in 2019 when I lost basically my seat in the parliament. And there was a very strange situation. My party was not any longer in the parliament. A new party was formed, led by Maya Sandu, who is the president of the Moldova today. She formed a new party. They did manage to get the majority, but they formed another kind of majority, which was an unusual majority with the Socialist Party, who is a pro-Russian party, to get rid of one oligarch that was also involved in these corruption scandals. So for about 1 year and a half, I think, or almost probably, I do not recall, almost 2 years, they were together. Then we had new elections. And in those new elections, Maya Sandu defeated the president of the country. This was in 2020, basically. Defeated the president of the country, Mr. Dodon. And in next year, 2021, we had parliament elections, and the party of Ms. Sandu obtained the absolute majority in the parliament. So they basically went back. They started, they continued the European integration policy we started in 2009. But there were also are still struggles, and one of the challenges we have is judiciary. So she started a big reform of justice in Moldova. Well, in my humble opinion, I think the way they did the reform and they are doing it, it's not the most successful way. There is a thing in English also term vetting. They started the vetting. Albania decided to have vetting for their judges. They are not happy with the reform. Vetting in Moldova, in my opinion, didn't go very well. So we are still struggling with a lot of challenges in this regard. And vetting is not over. So that you have to understand. You cannot postpone the justice reform forever and ever. There were other ways to efficiently reform the justice, but it was done this way, and we're still, as I said, struggling with this reform. Now, what happened in 2024, we had again presidential elections. My son decided to initiate a referendum. I may have again my separate opinion. I felt that was very risky, and indeed was very, very risky. She initiated that referendum that Moldova to introduce in the constitution a clause that we will continue European integration. I said, well, it's a political decision, and the risk is that if you initiate such a referendum, it may fail. And basically, in the country, she lost the referendum. She was able to win the referendum, as David pointed, very narrowly with the support of diaspora. But again, it proved my fear that it was very, very risky. Well, now, because the referendum was adopted, now we are more or less relaxed. But it was pretty risky to go this way. And we didn't need it. But she won her second mandate. And last year, we had parliament elections. Of course, after the war in Ukraine, Russia is interested to go further, to get Moldova under its influence. Last Tuesday, I was in Strasbourg. My son, our president, delivered the speech in Strasbourg, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. She mentioned that we are witnesses of two wars. One is a real war in Ukraine, another is so-called hybrid war. And Moldova is heavily affected by this hybrid war because of Russian interference, including our elections, which is true. I cannot deny this. This is true. It's obvious, but it's part of, how to say, international politics today. You see this interference everywhere between USA and Europe and vice versa, and China and Russia. Just look anywhere. One, I think she was very right when she mentioned about this hybrid war. But the challenge is, how do you how do you solve this? How do you mitigate this? How you stop this? Then you get into a gray area, and this is, of course, you have to wait all the policies. But we have a saying, I think it's also in English, you have to be careful not to throw the baby with the water. Because in your desire to stop this interference, you may affect the freedom of expression. And this is what happened. Many TV stations were shut down and so on. Well, but this may affect other democratic forces in the country. So you always are faced with this danger. You can become like Lukashenko and Putin, and you'll control everything. You'll control media, you'll do everything. So how to balance this? Again, the challenge is real, but let's see what are the best solutions to fight these challenges. So this is where I stand. So you probably will understand me, but if you want to clarify my position, you can ask me. Praise God again. We won. I mean, the pro-European forces, they won. But still, it's very fragile. And what I am concerned of is that European leaders like Macron, Merz, the Chancellor of Germany, Macron, the President of France, Donald Tusk, the Prime Minister of Poland, all three were in Moldova during the campaign, supporting our European integration, promising that everything will be okay, and probably by the year 2028, Moldova will be in the European Union. Well, after elections are over, they were over. Now the European Union speaks about some technical negotiations, so the rhetoric's completely changed. Mr. Zelensky last week made a statement and he said that Ukraine should be in the European Union by 2026. He was even more brave. And then the very next day, Mr. Merz said, no, 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 this is not realistic. So then you see that all this rhetoric has this geopolitical dimension in it. And now Mr. Zelensky must balance between USA and the European Union. He needs the support of USA to fight with Russia. At the same time, he doesn't want to, to upset the European leaders. And the situation is very, very tense and complicated nowadays. I am not so optimistic. I just gave an interview in Strasbourg. I said it's probably too optimistic to name the date or the time when we would join European Union. We have like a joke and it says someone is telling his friend, I want to visit United States again. His friend is asking, have you been before? No, last year I also wanted to visit. So then we want to visit every year, but we never do. So this is what we want to be part of EU, but nobody knows when or whether this will happen. So this is part of the challenges we are. And of course, as long as Ukraine resists, I think Moldova is safe. So we are praying for the end of the war because first of all, and regardless of our opinions concerning your president, but I think this is a very important truth. Many people are dying. In hundreds, thousands of people on both sides. Just I think this week, New York Times or something, they said about 2 million, according to their estimation, 2 million people died in these 4 years. This is terrible. This is a tragedy. It's a drama. So then, whatever, I think, but regardless of the cost, the war must stop. As I said, as long as Ukraine resists, we're okay. Because if Ukraine doesn't resist, Moldova will be like a desert for Mr. Putin. We are not able to resist the Russian invasion. Sorry for a long answer. You said me to give the context, so I want to touch on several aspects. Because, as I said, the referendum was not seen as important. Many people saw in the referendum a move to be elected in the first round. So people didn't like it. The referendum was seen by many people as a kind of like instrument, hidden instrument to help President Sandu to win the elections. So because of this, people didn't want, they said, well, I will vote for the president, but I will not vote for the president just in principle. So this was one of the things, because as I said, in my opinion, and there were many analysts, they were thinking that a referendum was not needed. The referendum, it was very risky to go the referendum. And when you have the smell that this is a tool to be used to help you to win the elections, people don't like it. You see, so that is the. Well, I think what the Constitutional Court did in Romania, they created a bad precedent. Later on, they came with, how to say, with arguments that they were given information that there was a Russian interference, there was no transparency in how the campaign was financed. But it was too late. If you have your secret services, intelligence, then you need to come before the date of election and tell and go to the court and prove that there are Russian money involved in that. There are some things that are not clear, not after the elections, because after people voted, then you create the feeling I cannot trust the election. So, in my opinion, it was a very bad move. It was too late. Well, their justification is they justify this, they saved in a way, they saved the democracy. But it's relative, how can you say you saved the democracy after, yeah, but you undermine the trust of people. You had to do it before, during, I mean, why those institutions, the Central Electoral Commission, the intelligence, if they had the information, they had to react immediately, not to wait. And, they actually ratified. They ratified the result of the election. There was going to be the second round. And when they saw that that guy might win, they decided just to cancel the election. So that is not, for me, it's not fair. It's not democratic to do it. You know, it happened, then it happened. Not to come and correct what happened yesterday. Well, I will give you a little bit of the context of churches in Moldova, but before I go there, Many times I am asked, many times I am accused that as a pastor I decided to run for politics. Since church and state are separated, how can you do this? Well, it depends how you define the separation of state and church. One of the sayings I like is, yes, church is separated from the state, but believers do vote. So then when we express or we have some values that we care for those values, it's not the church as an institution, but you as a leader, you can come and you express your view. You come with arguments. You can convince people this is the right way to go. So this is how I believe it. Because the separation of church and state historically, if you look, it was to protect the church, not to protect the state. So it was to protect the church from interference from the state, not to be afraid of the church. Nowadays, it's a bit different, a little bit emphasis. Now, speaking about the context in Moldova, the majority of people in Moldova, they are Eastern Orthodox. But what happened during the last 2 centuries was this. Moldova, I explained a little bit earlier, former Bessarabia, known by name Bessarabia, was annexed by Russian Empire because Russia helped Romania to fight Ottoman Turks. So the price for that help was annexing part of Romania between Nestor and Prut River, till Danube River. So for 106 years, Bessarabia, today's Republic of Moldova, was part of Russian Empire. In spite of the fact that the majority of people on this territory, they spoke Romanian, and churches were Romanian-speaking churches, they became part of the Russian Orthodox Church. Those were part of the same empire. Now, when the world, after the end of the World War II, in 1918, because of the Russian Revolution and because many changes took places in Europe, Austrian-Hungarian Empire collapsed. This is why we have now Hungary, you have Austria, but what? Many other countries, obtained their independence. Romania used that opportunity because Russia was very weak at that time and got Bessarabia back from Russia. And we became again a big country. But because before the World War II, Hitler and Stalin, they signed the secret agreement called Molotov-Ribbentrop Agreement, according to which Bessarabia, Baltic states were given to Russia. It was like Stalin and Hitler were dividing Europe. They divided Europe. But this was, I mean, this resisted until 41, when Germany became very strong, and they decided to break the agreement and attack the Soviet Union in June of 41. Now, Romania was an ally of Hitler. Romania decided to join Hitler, like with Mussolini. It was the prime minister of Romania was Antonescu. With Mussolini, these were two big countries in Europe that they joined hands with Hitler. But for Romania, it was very important to get back Moldova or Bessarabia from Russia. In fact, Hitler gave even a bonus. Odessa during the war was part of Romania. So Odessa was not Russia. Yes, Odessa was under Romanian, the Romanian governor. So Romania had even Odessa as part of its territory during the war. But because the winner of the war was the Soviet Union, then we lost everything. Antonescu was killed, and then Ceausescu became the leader of Romania, communist, and so on. And the king of Romania had to flee Romania. So it's a long history. I don't have time to tell you all this history. But what happened again was Moldova became a Soviet republic. And church again had to be part of the Russian Orthodox Church. Had to be part of the Russian Orthodox Church. Now, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Uh, the church, they, because of the Russian influence, I believe, we talked about what Maya Sandu mentioned, there is a lot of interference. The metropolitan of the Moldovan Orthodox Church decided to stay with the Russian Orthodox Church. And you have to understand one important thing, historic also. Baptist churches, I believe, Presbyterian churches, in one way or another, we believe in the autonomy of the local church. Catholic Church is the only one universal church. Now, Orthodox churches, they are national churches. That's why you have Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, Bulgarian Orthodox, Serbian Orthodox, and so on. There are, I think, 12 Orthodox churches. They are national Orthodox. So the Orthodox Church, they are not universal, they are national. They are not autonomous, but they are national. That's why Mr. Poroshenko had to fight a lot to obtain the recognition of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. So that was also part of this geopolitics. And then after he was able to convince the patriarch of Constantinople, this historic, let's say, he was able to convince them and they got the Thomas. Russian Orthodox Church, even today, do not recognize because they have a rule. Orthodox churches have an agreement. If there had to be recognized a new Orthodox Church, you have to have unanimity among other Orthodox churches. So, of course, Russian Orthodox Church will never recognize the independence of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. So that's why it's also part of this war between Russia and Ukraine. You have this also dimension. So imagine Moldova cannot claim to have a Moldovan National Orthodox Church. It's a very complicated way. So either you are part of the Russian Orthodox Church or part of the Romanian Orthodox Church. We are an independent country, but based on the church doctrine of the Orthodoxy, you cannot be a National Orthodox Church unless you are recognized by other Orthodox churches. So for us, it was very easy, for Baptists. The Soviet Union collapsed, we're part of the Soviet Union, Baptist Union of the Soviet Union. Soviet Union collapsed, we created the Baptist Union of Moldova, that's it, and we continue our ministry. But there was a fight between the Romanian priests that wanted to join back the Romanian Orthodox Church and the Russian priests that want to stay with the Russian Orthodox Church. And the fight started in 91, continued until 2002, when the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg forced our government to recognize or to register the Romanian wing of the Orthodox Church. So in Moldova, we have now two metropolitans. We have one called Moldovan Metropolitan, another Bessarabian, because of the historic name. So there are two wings. 2/3 of the Orthodox churches are still with Russia, Russian Orthodox Church, and 1/3 are with the Romanian Orthodox Church. Of course, those Romanian Orthodox churches and priests, they support the pro-European integration of Moldova. But those 2/3 that are with the Russian Orthodox Church, they oppose it. So then you have this struggle also within the country, because the majority of those priests, they are still under the Russian influence of a Russian patriarch. So that is again, which complicates the picture from the religious point of view. Evangelicals, in its majority, they are pro-Western in Moldova, whether these are Baptist, Pentecostals, or independent evangelical churches, they are pro-Western. But Orthodox Church, as I said, is divided. Nowadays. The leadership, now, because the Metropolitan is with the Russian Orthodox Church, he's aware of the political pressures and he doesn't make big statements as of today. I mentioned about Armenian Catholicos because Mr. Pashinyan is putting a lot of pressure on the head of the Armenian Apostolic Church because the Armenian Apostolic Church would not support Mr. Pashinyan. So nothing new under the sun. If you don't have the majority of churches supporting your policies, then you have kind of like a problem there. So, but for us evangelicals, as I said, we we of course care for values. We care for family values. We care for other values that are important to us, religious freedom, and but at the same time, our main focus is preaching the gospel. Our main focus is not to preaching the gospel is our main focus. So we are more focused on planting churches, spreading the gospel, and of course, from time to time, we are challenged with different changes in our legislation that comes from the European Union. And when I was in the Parliament, I would oppose many of these initiatives that I felt they are not good for the country, for the future of the country. So this is shortly, not shortly again. Well, after the collapse of Soviet Union, we had in Moldova about probably 80, maybe at the most 100 Baptist churches. So during these years, we were able to plant over 300 churches all over Moldova. So the Baptist churches, the Baptist movement has grown in these years. But at the same time, Diane, just a second. But we reached a kind of plateau because of some of the challenges we are faced with nowadays. Immigration, as I said, many Moldovans leave the country because they want a better job and so on. So the growth is not as it was in the first 10 years of our independence. But still, we are one of the strongest evangelical movements in Moldova. Do you mean threats to Moldova or threats to like myself or what?
Within the context of your spreading the gospel and opening up new churches and
Well, it's interesting. We don't have threats coming, let's say, from the Russian
like
part,
you did it.
like we did in the past. But we have problems with the Orthodox Church. Because the Orthodox Church is not happy with our movement. And if you go to a village, what you didn't have before a Baptist church, you want to plant a Baptist church here, priest will be against. Will be very opposed to this idea to plant a Baptist church in the village because he's losing, in a way, his believers or his parishioners, and so that is money, of course. That is money. That is not so easy. When I was in the parliament, I tried to build a relationship, kind of like a dialogue with the leaders of other denominations, including the Orthodox Church. So, if, for example, just hypothetically, let's say that the Metropolitan of the Russian Orthodox Church would step into this restaurant, he would see me, he would come, he would shake hand, and would greet each other. So, because I felt that it's important, we as Christians and Christian leaders, we need to, to dialogue with each other. It doesn't have to embrace necessarily, but we need to recognize each other, respect each other. That dialogue, you have this dialogue with each other, and I was able to do it when I was a member of parliament. For example, on each Christmas and Easter, I would send Christmas cards to them, and I would receive Christmas cards from them. And a couple of years ago, after I, was not re-elected, one of the metropolitans saw me and said, "We don't receive any more your cards. What happened?" I try to build that, respectful communication between leaders and so on. But on the local level, there are sometimes tensions because Orthodox are not happy with the growing of evangelicals in Moldova. Well, I'd say that in Moldova, there are some particularities. One is, as I said, poverty, lack of jobs, and migration. So people leave the country. So the country loses its population, not just churches. So it's just a general problem that Moldovans are leaving the country, and it affects also churches. Another thing that you see, many villages are dying. people are moving to cities. Even those who go abroad, they get a job and earn some money. When they come back, most of them do not return to their own villages. We don't have good infrastructure in the villages, roads, sanitation. If they earn money working somewhere in the European Union, they come back to Chisinau, most of them. In the capital of the Republic of Moldova, today you have about 25% of people living in the capital. Everyone wants to live in the capital, maybe Belz, maybe other cities, but not in the villages. So city churches are not declining. In Chisinau, churches are not declining. Even in Belz, churches, in my opinion, are not declining. But village churches are in a decline. But this decline is not so much due to the fact that people, because we are not growing as we used to grow, but the decline is mainly of the social dimension, not of the religious dimension in a way, if you understand what I'm saying. You see, so these are some of the factors that affect church life, church growth in Moldova today, especially in villages. In villages also are faced with crisis of leadership. Even students that come to UDG, they come, young man comes from a village, he graduates. It's very, very unlikely that he'll go back to his village to be a pastor there. So in villages, pastors are old and you don't have new pastors willing to go to serve in a village, especially if it's a small village and so on. Well, Orthodox churches, they are not so keen to do charity like evangelical churches, even like Catholic Church. Catholic Church does more charity and humanitarian work, social work than Orthodox churches. What? Well, well, the mentality is a bit different. They say, what do people do for the church? So it's not what church does for the people. What do people do for the church? Then you change the kind of like the accent, the emphasis is different in their theology and their mentality, you know. Most of our graduates, when I say graduates, I don't mean UDG only, but most graduates from state universities, even private universities, I think there is a statistic that about probably 70, 60% of them, they go abroad. They do not stay in the country. About 60, 70% of them, they leave the country. They do not stay in the country. No, I didn't mean it. I said all universities. Oh, yeah. All universities. I mean, all universities in the country. Don't ask me about young people. You know, after they graduate, uh, the majority of them, they are. You see, one of the advantages of course, it depends how you look at this, but I think I explained last time. I now I have three because the visa is an expired passport. But I travel with two passports because I have a Romanian passport, I have a Moldovan passport, and more than half of Moldovans, or at least one third of Moldovans, they have Romanian passports. And if because with a Moldovan passport, I cannot get a job in the EU. With a Romanian passport, I can. What Romania did, which historically, I mean, from one point of view, it's fair because we were one country. My parents were born in Romania, in Greater Romania. My parents were born when Moldova was part of Romania. Of course, they speak that. Everybody in Moldova speaks Romanian. It's the same language, but it's not. I mean, historically, it goes this way. There is a law in Romania. If your parents or your grandparents or your great grandparents were Romanian citizens, you can claim Romanian citizenship. So this is why I was able to get a Romanian citizenship because my parents they have Romanian birth certificate. They were born in a time when before the war, and before the war, I explained Moldova was part of Romania, and now based on the Romanian legislation, I can claim Romanian citizenship. Well, it's true that not all Moldovans who claim Romanian citizenship, they do this because they love Romania so much, but for pragmatical reasons. With an EU passport, you can go anywhere in 26 European countries, get a job, go to university, and so on. With a Moldovan passport, you can't, because Moldova is not part of EU. But with a Romanian passport, you can. Speaking about the European Christian political party, if I would not have a Romanian passport, I could not be a president of the European Christian political party. Because in the European Parliament, there are 12 parties today. One of them, accredited by the European Parliament, is European Christian political party. It's the smallest party in the European Parliament that I lead, but it's the only Christian party. But I had to be a European citizen. I cannot. And for example, I participated in this, debate with Ursula von der Leyen 1 year and a half running for the presidency of the European Commission, but I was able to run because I'm a European citizen. If I'm not an European citizen, I cannot. That is also probably too much information. I use my Moldovan passport. I use my Moldovan passport. I come as a Moldovan. In Europe, I travel as a Romanian. But in Moldova, so you know, in Moldova, according to our constitution, it's illegal to have double citizenship. A Moldovan can have two citizenship. It's written in our constitution.